Good evening, First Apostolic Church of Aurora, and welcome to this evening's devotion. I'm Pastor Brent Coltharp, and thank you for joining us tonight. We are continuing to pray for our brothers and sisters, those who are in the hospital, those who are at home, the sickness is taking place. And please make sure to join us daily. At 5 o'clock every afternoon, Sister Graham sends out the prayer request list with the needs that we are aware of and a current update, a status update. So please take those to the Lord in prayer. We continue to pray for 2 people that are intubated. Continue to remember Brother Caulfield and Brother Tim Sitar. And we want the Lord to touch them. And then my mom is still in the hospital. Roger Kittner is still in the hospital. And we want the Lord to minister to them and want to see everyone come home. We are very thankful that a number of our members have come home and are still recovering, but we're thankful that they are strong enough and recovered enough to leave the hospital. So let's give thanks to the Lord for that. And don't forget service on Sunday at 10 a.m., prayer at home at 9:30. Please make sure to make our pre-service prayer a part of your home routine as we prepare for services. And then, of course, youth are still meeting on Monday night and on Thursday night. And then we have devotions all nights except for Sunday and Wednesday. Make sure to submit prayer requests, as I mentioned before, through info@facaurora.org. And that is for our internal First Apostolic Church prayer requests. And then also go to the prayer wall at our website where there are those from around the world that can put a prayer request for us to pray for. And you can check that you've been praying for those needs. Don't forget to be faithful in our giving and our worship through giving. Go to the website, facaurora.org, click on the Give Now page for tithes and offerings, and you can also do so through the app if you use that. Man, be watching for Sister Angela Coltharp. She's sharing resources for children's ministry as well. Pentecostal Publishing House, part of the United Pentecostal Church, is having every week. They're uploading videos, and I believe that there are even downloadable worksheets and other resources. We will be giving more information to you as that comes, but even past episodes are available online, and for children's ministry, that can be a blessing to them. Today, I want to talk about shaking it off. And in Acts 21, it relays the narrative of the Apostle Paul, how he was arrested and imprisoned in Jerusalem. It would be there because of his perception that he had abandoned the laws of God, that the jealousy between the priests and the Judaizers who were trying to undermine the missionary journeys that he had taken around the world would attack him, confront him. And he would be called to testify before the chief priest and the council. It would be in these chapters, beginning at Acts 21, that Paul would sort of lay out the gospel and his hope and confidence in the resurrection of the dead. And this would lead to quite a skirmish between Pharisees and Sadducees because of the resurrection of the dead. And the Judaizers would desire to kill Paul. And so, as a result, Paul is moved to Caesarea, which is on the coast of Israel. And he would remain there for 2 years. At times, he would be questioned by Felix and then eventually by Agrippa for that period of time. And then Paul would appeal to Caesar. And as a Roman citizen, that was his right to be able to appeal to Caesar. And the process would begin to extradite him from Caesarea to Rome, where he would stand before Caesar. It's during this voyage on the way to Rome that something interesting happens. Paul is put under the care of a centurion named Julius. And Julius is responsible to get the prisoners to Rome. And as they're on the voyage in different harbors, it gets late in the season. It gets a time where sailing was frowned upon. And many times captains of their ships would sort of wait out the winter time in harbor where it was safe and secure. And Paul lets the centurion, Julius, know that they need to wait it out, that if they were to set sail for Italy, that a storm's going to come and they're not going to make it. Of course, Julius, the centurion, listens to the ship's captain and the pilot rather than Paul. And that's where we get to Acts the 28th, when They are on this journey, and sure enough, based on the words that Paul has spoken, the storm comes. They are having to abandon ship at sea as it breaks apart, and they end up landing on the island of Malta. Acts 28, beginning with verse 1, says it like this. Now, when they had escaped, they then found that the island was called Malta. And the natives showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and made us all welcome because of the rain that was falling and because of the cold. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. So when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom, though he has escaped the sea, yet justice does not allow him to live. That he shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. However, they were expecting that he would swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But after they had looked for a long time and so no harm come to him, they changed their minds and they said he was a god. This narrative, this interesting narrative came to my mind today as I was thinking about devotion. And there's a few things I want to draw your attention to from the text and this simple story. First of all, this was a season of winter for the island. You pick that up not only in the season that Paul and them are sailing, so earlier in the text, but you get the understanding too from this specific paragraph that it's raining, it's cold, and this is the difficult time of the year. And yet the island welcomed the 276 souls who had been shipwrecked with Paul. They came off the ship. They had been in the water, so they were soaked, they were cold, they were miserable. And the islanders began to build fires where those who have survived could warm themselves and dry themselves. And Paul and no doubt many other passengers began to get fuel for the fire, to keep the fire going, get sticks to continue to fuel the fire, when the narrative states that a viper fastened onto his hand. Now, the viper had been trying to stay warm as well, no doubt, and Paul disturbed his resting place, startled him, grabbing the sticks, and so the viper does what vipers do. It latched on to Paul's hand. And no doubt Paul screamed like a little girl and began to shake his hand to get the viper off of his hand like I would and like most of you would. And then Luke gives us the response of the Maltese who have been watching this take place. First of all, the Maltese are watching Paul with this viper, and he shakes it off, and the Maltese says, justice has been done. No doubt this man is a murderer. And even though he escaped the judgment of the sea and made it to dry land and even to a fire and was warming himself up, that fate has had its way because this viper has latched onto his hand. And so the Bible says they sort of sit back, they're watching, they're thinking justice is taking place. They're waiting for Paul to swell up and die. They're familiar with the environment, they're familiar with the vipers and the different dangers of the island. So the islanders are just waiting for this to happen. And then when Paul does not swell up and Paul does not die, but he seems fine, notice this, they change their minds. They went from saying justice has been done and this murderer, they make the judgment, he must be a murderer, the worst of the worst, to saying this man is a god. This man is a god. They changed their mind. Their expectations were not met. He didn't swell up, didn't die, and so they changed their mind. And I thought about in today's devotion, when I was thinking about the historical occurrence, this is a winter season for us. Now, admittedly, officially, we are in spring, and it is a beautiful day outside today, and the last few days have been very beautiful. The sun has been shining. However, we understand that that is not the way things are in our lives, that this is a winter time. And physically, emotionally, maybe even spiritually, this is a wet and cold season, and there's a lot of misery that's taking place in the world. And we're not here because of the choices that we have made. Notice when it came to Paul's life, Paul advised against the journey. This was not the timing that he saw. So Paul is on this island. He's went through the shipwreck, the viper bite, not because it was a risk that he took. Actually, it was the centurion and the pilot and the captain of the ship. And we find out that he was there because the choices that other people have made. And when it comes to the coronavirus and the pandemic in the world today. I know that they're tracking down, our scientists are tracking down its origination, and it's interesting to read some of the information about that and how it has passed and went from one area of China to now it's around the world. And I'm sure we'll continue to hear about this for months and years to come. However, we who are sort of caught in the middle of this, most of the time we're like Paul. We're just trying to survive through this challenge. We're trying to warm ourselves by the fire, to recover, to get our strength. And then a viper latches onto us. Now again, this is, I'm just drawing an analogy from this narrative. There are things that can latch onto us in a holistic manner, again, as I talked about, emotionally. We can feel the sting of where we're at right now. Spiritually, we can feel that. This is a time for us to watch ourselves and guard ourselves spiritually, because we're holistic beings. We can't separate what's happening with us physically from our emotions from our spiritual life. So if you are sick physically, there's a good chance this is affecting you emotionally and can affect you spiritually. If emotionally you're wrestling with depression, discouragement, maybe you're physically fine, but what's happening in the world and having to stay in, some of the orders that are taking place, maybe that's wearing on you emotionally in that sense. Or maybe it's spiritually. As you look at what's happening in the world, you question, how does this happen in the world? And where's God and all these things? There's a lot of things that can sort of latch onto us during this time of vulnerability. And I don't want this to sound light, but I do want to use from the text what Paul did. Paul made a decision to shake it off. Again, there's some things, when I talk about shaking it off and I'm talking about the text, I understand we can't just shake off the physical illness. If so, I would have loved to shake it off the very first moment I felt it. I understand there's some things that are going through. What I'm saying is that we can't allow this to grab onto our spirit, our emotions, our spirituality, our walk with God, our relationships. We can't allow that to grab onto us. We have to take actions against it. We don't have... Paul, when the viper bit him, he wasn't just sitting there and say, well, I've been bitten by the viper, I'm just going to let the viper rest there and as long as he wants to have a hold. No, he took an action to get rid of the viper and to be healthy. That's what I want us to do. I understand that we might not be able to help that something has latched onto us, but we can make sure that we take steps to shake it off. We can make sure of our prayer life, of the songs that we sing, of what we're reading, making sure we're reading in the scriptures, making sure we're practicing thankfulness in this time. As we've mentioned, there are a lot of times that if we're not careful, we can stop being thankful because we are focused on what's wrong in the world. Now, we live in a media-driven, a social media-driven as well, world that is full of commentators that are looking and making all kind of judgments in our day and time. One moment, they might be proclaiming that justice is done, and the other moment they can proclaim that you're a god the next. We live in a fickle world where the perceptions of others constantly goes from one extreme to the other. And we don't base our lives and how we're living based on the fluid nature and the fickleness of what commentators have. Realize in our world, anybody can be an author. With social media and the internet, I read one individual sharing that years ago, for somebody to be read and somebody to have a voice, they not only had to write something, but then there was a fact checker, and then there was an editor, and then eventually a publisher. That by the time somebody's words got out, it had to go through 4 or 5 different filters before it was ever published. But that's not the case today. Today, anyone can make statements on social media. Anyone can put something out for the world to see. And we find out that many times we are influenced by what we're hearing on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, some of the Snapchat, some of the different ones that are out there. We're influenced by that. And so I want to encourage you that during this time where we're at, there are some things that we need to shake off, because our trust is not in what the Maltese say. Our trust is not in the judgments of Julius the centurion or the pilot of the ship or the owner of the ship, the captain of the ship, or even other prisoners. Our trust and confidence is in the Word of God. And what Paul knew is that even while I'm on this shipwreck, which I do not want to be on, I don't want to be on this island. I don't want to be bitten by a viper. But Paul knew that throughout all of that, his trust was in his relationship with God. And he knew that God had a plan and purpose for his life, and that he eventually was going to end up in Rome, because that's what God's plan was. But these were some of the stops along the way. And the plan and the will of God and the prophecies of God for us at First Apostolic Church have not changed. This is just one of the stops along the way that we are making. And so while we're making this stop and we're experiencing the sting maybe of a viper's bite, and maybe the miserableness of some of the cold and the rain of being stranded on this island, here's what we do. We continue to put our faith in God, our trust in God, to be thankful, to make sure our prayer and our worship with God is right. And we do not allow the perceptions of others to determine where we're at with God, because the perceptions of others will go from one extreme to the other. But what we know about God and His Word will sustain us in this hour. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I just want to bring some encouragement to you to say, continue to go forward. Continue to shake off the things that will attack us during this time, and put your confidence and trust in God. God's going to bring us through. There's a great testimony to be had. So God bless you. We look forward to joining you next time. Amen. Continue to be in prayer for our brothers and our sisters, and for our healthcare providers, for those who are around the world that are fighting this battle. And we're going to come through this at First Apostolic Church, and God has great revival and great things ahead as we remain faithful during this time. I love you very much. God bless you.